joining me today, Greg. We'll be discussing navigating supply chain disruptions and just the impact of operational challenges and the power of listening. Just to quickly start, if you could introduce yourself and just touch on your background a little bit, that would be greatly appreciated.
My background has all been in supply chain. I always say, find something you love to do and you never have to work a day in your life. And that's been true to me. Mostly it has been end-to-end supply chain, but recently in the logistics area. So taking care of our distribution center network of 38 DCs, as well as about 50,000 containers that move out of Asia, Southeast Asia, to all points in the world. And been with Mattel about 8 years now and enjoying it.
You've had a really extensive career leading supply chain operations around the world. In your experience, what role does listening to the frontline workforce play in navigating large-scale disruptions?
I'll start with the word Gemba, which means going to the workplace where the work gets done, where the money's won or lost, at least in the supply chain. The best ideas are always going to come from the people on the front line that are at Gemba doing the work. During the pandemic, our frontline workers were essential. They were labeled essential workers that we incentivized when everyone was at home to make sure they came to work to flow our goods. We did surveys twice a year on engagement, but it's really not enough to really understand what's going on and get the heartbeat of your workforce and what's going on. Being able to get the feedback, i.e. through work step, in this case, it's been valuable to the leadership and to the employees of creating a better work culture.
And when you think about building an agile and resilient supply chain team, how important is it to have systems in place that give you real-time visibility into employee sentiment and engagement?
I think we've invested heavily in rolling out a flow system, for example, for inbound goods. And that means that we have to give milestone data on where the goods are at any point in the supply chain. And when I say we've invested heavily in systems to make sure we have a predictive inbound goods flow and supply chain from Southeast Asia primarily, because we need to commit to our customers on when the goods are going to be here. And we do that at a high rate of reliability. And then also we're a quarterly driven business. There are a lot of peaks at the end of each quarter, at the end of every month. And it really takes communication and coordination across the supply chain down to the workforce, for example, so they can plan their weekends or whether they're going to work or have the weekend off. So that is super important for us in having that agile and resilient supply chain. And it all is going to wind up with high employee engagement, especially during peak processing times, that we can count on their commitment.
You've led major operational turnarounds and transformations. So what have you learned about change management, especially in high pressure environments, that you think other ops leaders need to hear?
In a turnaround, I always start, there are three important key items. The first one is, in a turnaround, you've got to get people's attention, right? Unfortunately, a lot of times to get people's attention, it's through events like headcount reductions or RIFs that happens, and it's happened before, at least in my career. So that's number one, to make sure you get people's attention. Two, when you're in a turnaround situation, there's typically money leaking out everywhere, so you really need to stop, the bleeding. That was the case for Mattel back in 2017 and 2018. We brought in a lot of help, for the turnaround. A bit of consulting horsepower, as I would call it. And it's great to see the success from that. We called it structural simplification, which we took hundreds of millions of dollars over a 2-year run rate that was validated to really, I'm going to say, right size our manufacturing footprint to what the volume needed to be, and keeping our core competencies there in our owned and operated plants, because we do have a competitive advantage in die-cast, which is our Hot Wheels, as well as in dolls. And then we also went to a capital light model with external manufacturing, or what they call co-manufacturing. Also in logistics, there's been a lot of progress on the turnaround in taking, I'm going to say tens of millions of dollars out of waste, or just better ways of doing things. It's really not asking the people to work harder. It's asking the people to work smarter, right, by having good processes and systems. So today, our CEO would say that supply chain is a competitive advantage, and I believe it really is. And then thirdly, after stopping the bleeding and that money that's leaking out is making sure along the way that you create, as we did, small wins for people to rally throughout the turnaround. Our warehouse workers, actually employees of Mattel, participate in our company incentive plan. So at the end of the day, they're rewarded commensurately as the executives are. So that's refreshing that it goes down to, the frontline workforce on our management incentive, and it was key to creating those small wins to turn around the company.
With such a large distributed workforce, how do you balance standardization with the need for flexibility in frontline operations, especially across multiple sites and regions?
That's a great question. There is a lot of standardization, and we're always going to look for better ways or good processes to follow. Right, our global function that I lead is about how we leverage, whether it's top-to-top relationships with our key suppliers and partners that we use in logistics and transportation. And it's also about being what we call the shipper of choice, where companies want to do business with you, our suppliers. And the reason they want to do business is we pay our bills on time. We turn their equipment. We're just very easy, respectful of a win-win, and that pays off. And it certainly paid off a lot during the pandemic, especially with ocean capacity, which was, we all heard the supply chain challenges and constraints, and vessels and containers tied up in the harbor. Well, we were able to break through that. We got capacity in a very constrained time because as it opened up last minute and we were able to use it, we got the first call because we're easy to do business with. So I think that is a way to continue to be respectful and run your business. Having that global leverage is important. We operate regionally. That's where we're going to execute in the regions. And then the other one is locally. This is where we think, and we need feedback, whether it's through the communities and some of the good charity work we do. But we want to make sure we think locally and know what's going on in the micro regions across the world. The other item on your network standards, which we work on across our global footprint, for me, I always talk about there's a difference. We don't call it best practice sharing. We call it good practice transfer. And the difference is best practice implies that you're nearly 100% perfected before it's shared. And that sharing is optional. When I talk about good practice transfer, hey, we're about 80% of the way there. It's a good practice. It's time to roll it out to the network in total. Transfer means it's really not optional. It's mandatory. So we talk a lot about that good practice transfer versus best practice sharing on how we get things done. And at the end of the day, the quality of your team is really going to be dependent on the speed and precision at which you can solve things and get them implemented.
How do you personally stay connected to what's happening on the ground in your distribution and logistics teams? And how has your view on frontline leadership evolved over the years?
I built my career off of and started and cut my teeth in frontline DC operations and transportation operations. And I encourage all my leaders to make sure we call it a day in the life, or even if it's a half a day in the life, make sure when you come in, because it builds that camaraderie and it builds an appreciation and a deep respect for what people have to go through. Spend time on the front line. We've got some new leaders that have come in and they're doing that. It's my job to make sure they commit to that and take the time, because when I said a better appreciation, it's also you're developing that leadership quality of empathy, of walking in their shoes. When I look at our process and look at the competition around us, I think our employees stick with us through this because of that empathy, because of the leadership. 70% of why people leave a company is their relationship with their immediate supervisor. So if that's strong, you're going to have good retention. We're a family at Mattel, so we do a lot of extra things for our employees, and at the end of the day, that results in lower turnover. I even think through the pandemic in one of our distribution centers and going through that couple-year period that we had almost no turnover. It speaks for itself when you have that family culture and take care of your people and invest in them.
As we close the conversation, I've just got a couple more questions. What excites you about the role of technology, AI, and continuous listening tools in helping leaders make smarter, faster decisions in operations?
AI is here to stay. We're certainly looking at the uses, and there are some use cases, still a lot more to follow. We also have AI governance in place, so we don't get out there on bleeding edge things, and we have a pretty systematic approach. But we're seeing a lot of potential use cases. Some of them we're actually piloting in our direct-to-consumer right now, which is really around error proofing and having evidence, with the consumer of what's going into the box, how many units. Nowadays, you can actually videotape it, all that, and keep it in the cloud for a couple, 2-3 months in case you do get a consumer call, and have the facts and data in the pictures, weigh scales tied to AI. So a lot of work on error proofing. I think we'll also expand AI and the use of it, not having to use a time or your badge to clock in. We'll be using facial recognition for clocking in and clocking out. So I think those are a couple of examples of where it's just a matter of when, not a matter of how to use it. We're using it in our consumer services area to help with facilitating closing out a customer call or consumer call with high satisfaction. We're using it for a lot of repetitive administrative tasks. I think it's going to come through as a productivity and efficiency enabler. A lot of things happening with AI that we're starting to get some progress on.
For companies starting to integrate feedback systems into their daily operations, what would be your advice for getting true adoption across both HR and ops teams?
Just like with WorkStep, if I use that as an example, it's about never compromise your standards, never give up. There's a resiliency factor there. We found WorkStep at the Manifest conference, I think it was 4 years ago. And it took a couple of years for us to work through some of the obstacles. The obstacle for HR at that time was, hey, our people are surveyed out. We do a lot of surveys. So, another one. And I think there's been a high adoption and a high positive, hey, we want to roll this out to other parts of the company. But at first, it was tough to get adopted. Our IT folks, hey, this is another system that we have to integrate into our systems. We finally said, no, we're not going to really integrate it. We don't need an integrated approach for our distribution network to do this. So again, at the beginning, there was a lot of skepticism, but now there's a lot of positive momentum with the data and information we're getting out of WorkStep. It's not just solving immediate problems that come up, but it's also looking at a view and some of the benchmarking that goes on around pay for performance and all the statistical things and facts and data that WorkStep brings for us to take a look at. It's going to continue to improve our culture. And we see a lot less of what I'm going to say, the sort of surprises or negative stuff you have to work on, and a lot more of the trends and data that give us a proactive planning approach to what we do. And at the end of the day, that's how you change your culture for the better.
Thank you so much, Greg, for the time today. We really appreciate your insights and taking the time.
Thanks a lot, and talk soon. Bye.